And to do so, we are being joined by Dr. Joanna Siekiera, NATO consultant and expert in international law. Good evening, delighted to have you with us.
Good evening, I'm happy to be back.
Good evening. So, yes, we are to discuss Putin's visit to China, but first I need to ask you about your thoughts on what happened today in Slovakia.
I think it's a very sad warning that we are so focusing on war in Ukraine that we tend to forget about internal affairs. We must protect our citizens first, because this is very dangerous, that there are lonely wolves, there are terrorist groups, other non-state actors, and we somehow are hoping that only the war is occurring in Ukraine or in Gaza, in Africa, but not in the heart of Europe. So I hope that, of course, Prime Minister will be healed, and again, that will be just a bitter lesson that we must stay attentive, because the enemies for our democracies, they don't sleep, and they wait for us to be, again, forgetting the threats, internal and external.
Thank you for this comment.
We all wish Mr. Fico speedy recovery, but what really sort of bothers me, right, is the way that this could be spinned by various politicians, of course, and chiefly by Russian President Vladimir Putin, right? He is going to visit China. What do you think will be on his agenda there?
Definitely focusing on shifting powers towards Russia and China. I've been commenting on your channel many times that China and Russia, as communist regimes, they use all the tactics. So not only military, but also political, economic, and law. I research on lawfare, so legal warfare, always underline that Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, they already said that they will from now on guide international law system. So maybe it will not be convincing to us as NATO countries, but it is convincing to the partners in Central Asia, in Africa, in South America. So those countries who are poor, developing or underdeveloped. So this is very important to know that their image of free world is so much different than ours, and this is very dangerous, because they have plans for the decades to come, not only for this year, but they are very diligent in pursuing their goal, while we only react on some actions, which is very, very dangerous.
Right, using this post-colonial rhetoric, right? Both Putin and Xi, and also trying to engage the global South, right?
Right. Now, as you mentioned it, this alliance goes way back, and it was Russia who gave China the nuclear technology, right? And you know, to quote Vladimir Putin, to deepen the aim of his visit is to deepen cooperation in industry and high-tech, outer space, and peaceful uses of nuclear energy, artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and other innovative sectors. Now, could this shared technology be used by Russia's war machine?
Definitely, yes. And what is very frightening, that artificial intelligence and other new technologies, they are not yet regulated by the law. So I am pretty sure that Russia and China will try to affect the shape of new international norms, either written in treaty or customary norms, and then how we, the West, can fight back if it's already settled by Russia and China. And again, they have a lot of allies. This is not how I am witnessing all the time, that we Westerners, we are so sure that we won this battle. But no, we must be really modest and understand that Russia and China, they have resources. They have natural resources. They have very hard-working people with capital, with all the intellect they need to conquer us, the West, because they look down on us, on our values. For them, democracy, human rights, they do not exist. They kill, they torture, they kidnap, they sterilize, they use forced abortion, and I can go on with the crimes those regimes are doing. While we, the West, we are still too weak.
Right, that is certainly something to be worried about. And I actually wanted to take a closer look at Xi Jinping, right? Because before inviting Vladimir Putin on a state visit, he himself paid a visit to France, Hungary, and Serbia. And I wanted to take a closer look at France, right? Because Emmanuel Macron has even called in Ursula von der Leyen to help him in that discussion, in that meeting. And what I believe they were trying to achieve is some form of pressure, right, putting some form of pressure on China to intervene on the issue of Ukraine. Now, what kind of signal is Xi Jinping trying to send Europe with this visit?
Very good question, and I can tell you that actually I was watching TV material on Chinese television. I myself started to learn Chinese to understand their mentality. And the way Chinese were portraying that basically France represents Europe, which is totally under Chinese influence, that we are not peer partners. European Union likes to portray that China is our peer partner in economy or in climate change, but this is anyhow from the Chinese perspective. They look at us as another market. They look at us as, well, politicians who will agree on anything China will tell us to do, which is really frightening. And I don't understand either the Western countries like France or Germany, but as you quoted exactly, Hungary or Serbia, they either do not see that China as a threat, or they see, however, they accept. And that is even more frightening, because what I always repeat in my speeches, in my NATO courses, after every yuan goes values of communism, or submerging people, again, tortures, killing opponents, political opponents, minorities. So we are Europeans opening the doors for China. They don't even need to struggle to bargain. They just go in, full in.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, you know, I'm rather wondering whether they consider the US to be their equal, and will they listen to American appeals not to send dual-use goods to Russia?
Yes, so for the US, I just returned from Washington. Nobody has to convince that China is the threat. Not Russia, but indeed China. The Chinese are using Russians for their own benefit, but again, US is so much dependent even on Chinese steel. This is unbelievable. Indo-Pacific, all the Navy bases with ships, they are made of Chinese steel. This is unacceptable. Either we want to compete China, or we will help them to build their own power. And again, when we talk about Chinese leverage, tax system, World Trade Organization, giving China a lot of power. Chinese, they don't need to pay taxes. This is unacceptable because, again, every country has their national business, but either we stand for the values as democracy, the rule of law, protection of human rights, or we rely solely on benefit, like, unfortunately, but Serbia and Hungary.
Right. I mean, China certainly has deep pockets and uses them to influence many countries and state actors. But my question is, you've mentioned Indo-Pacific, right? Typically, the countries from that region sort of abstain during the UN vote on various issues, such as regarding Ukraine, right? So my question is why? How dependent are they, right? And sort of how to navigate that ground for. You know.
Again, my beloved topic, my research, doctoral and postdoctoral, is about the Indo-Pacific, as you know. So those countries are relatively new because also Palau became independent in 1994. So those countries, they struggle between the West, which originally they come from after the process of colonization, and China, who is very generous. You mentioned this diplomacy, which I called checkbook diplomacy. They just come and build an elementary school. They just come and provide an ambulance. So for those countries, especially Solomon Islands, China has been bribing those politicians for decades, that now they, of course, expect full loyalty when it comes to any law or opening for military bases. And US was absent. They were in the Middle East for the past 2 decades. Suddenly they woke up and said, oh, wow. So those countries, they started to say no to Taiwan, but yes to China. So there was a big wake-up call since 2019. So now we still have to remember that as long as we keep those countries for our side, because again, Indo-Pacific, that's the majority of population on the planet. That's the place where international traffic, sea lines, but also airfares, they cross there. Also, seabed of Indo-Pacific, there are resources down there, which I dare to say there will be next war about those resources in the seabed of Pacific Ocean. So we must be attentive. We must look close what China is doing, because we must protect ourselves. We live in a global village. Whatever is happening in Indo-Pacific will sooner or later affect us, and affect us deeply in law, in politics, what kind of economic bondages we can enter in. Because again, China is communist. So we cannot expect that they will accept our free world choices, freedom of navigation, freedom of speech. Those terms, they simply do not exist for those regimes.
Right. Quite often we hear these warnings that China and the US are on a path to war. But yesterday Joe Biden announced news tariff rates on Chinese imports to protect American industries from unfair competition. And I'm wondering whether it is a smart move. I mean, of course, you protect your own market, but your own economy. But aren't such moves just pushing Beijing into arms of Putin? Forming this axis of evil, whatever you call it.
I wouldn't say so, but I would say that it's too little, too late. Mm-hmm. Why only now, when China has already built such strong economy? And yes, China suffers from demographic problems. India is growing. This is also very important. And only last year, India outgrown the population of China for the first time in history. Indian people are highly educated, skills. So when we look at this puzzle between China and Russia, and the US, Russia is there, but Russia is fully dependent. Yes, Russia is rich of natural resources, but who produces the weaponry? North Korea, who is outside of World Trade Organization, which I always love to make students look at them. They can produce whatever weapon, whatever time, because they are not bound by international law, sadly to say, because international law lacks enforcement measures. So, yes, I'm very curious how it's gonna be like also with the Navy competition, because again, China's Navy is already larger than the US. I don't look at this in a promising way. I'm more concerned. Yes, we have our allies. We have Republic of Korea. We have Japan.
Right, but let me ask you about, because you said that China is also, apart from money, that China is distributing some kind of ideology. Yes. But to me, so far, it seemed that it's sort of purely based on business. So what are they trying to distribute, right? I mean,
they are trying to, as you said, redistribute values which are total subordination for the party, one party. So there is no pluralism like we have in democracy. Every entity, is it private citizens or corporations, their goal must be in alignment with the purpose of the Chinese Communist Party. So this is very dangerous because we like to think that, oh, if there is a Chinese shipping company, Costco, the largest globally, then they just participate in capitalist free market. But this is anyhow the case because they will push their own values on people. They will, again, target militarily, but they will target political opponents. This is what they do in China. Just to remind you, more than 5 million people locked in concentration camps for being Uyghurs, for being Muslims. So those examples, and again, as I mentioned before, forced sterilization, abortions of women who are not in the same ethnicity as Chinese citizens.
So they used to have the one-child policy, right?
Indeed.
Yes.
Right. Lastly, I'd like to ask you about India because that's quite interesting to me. Now, you said they are outgrowing China slowly. So the question is, are they still sitting on the fence, or could they be lured into China's or the Western orbit?
So yes, and this is what I disagree with Western commentators who called India a balancer. But balancer with the first population on the planet, they want more. They will not be happy with only being a balancer. So in our own benefit is to keep India closer to us. Yes, I know they struggle with human rights. I know they struggle with women's rights. They struggle with pluralism of parties. Yet the same with Turkey and NATO. If we don't have NATO, Turkey and NATO, they will hack our opponent. The same with India.
Right, but didn't the sanctions imposed on Russia just put Russia in India's into India's territory a little more, right? Because there are sanctions on oil, and then India got very cheap oil, right, from Russia. So that relationship has been tightened in a sense.
It is, definitely. But then again, we must be active, not proactive. We must ensure that India, you are maybe not the Western nation, but we want to see you as one. The same with Japanese and Koreans. So again, if they will not be happy with cooperation with us, they would not have any civilizational problem with hugging China or Russia. The same with Turkey in NATO. So again, smart players should play with different players, I would say.
Great
Joanna
words to sum it
Siekiera,
up.
thank you.